Okay, let's dive right into this. If you spent, any time at all navigating modern dating culture lately, you absolutely know how exhausting it can feel. Welcome back to another explainer where we take these complex topics and break them down into crystal clear visual takeaways. Today, we're focusing our lens on relationship psychology, specifically looking at a pretty fascinating shift in dating dynamics. We're going to unpack the psychology of men who consciously choose to avoid chasing women. It's a concept that honestly gets misunderstood a lot. But as we look closely at the research highlighted in our source material today, a very distinct and frankly very healthy picture begins to emerge.
Which brings us to the core question for this explainer. Why do some men simply stop chasing? Now, for decades, pop culture has pretty much pushed this narrative that pursuit is just a standard, built-in part of the relationship dance, right? The assumption is usually that if a guy isn't actively pursuing or chasing, he must be lacking something. But psychology shows us a completely different story. So we really have to ask ourselves, what is actually going on beneath the surface when the chase comes to a dead stop?
Well, society usually jumps straight to the assumption that a man who doesn't chase is just painfully shy, terrified of rejection, or maybe completely disinterested. But the reality? The reality is actually a highly conscious choice. It happens when a man's priorities shift and his standards evolve. It isn't just some passive reaction fueled by fear. It is a total, active recalibration of how he approaches relationships from the ground up.
Let's move to our first major trait and see how this builds. Trait number 1. Valuing mutual effort.
This first major shift is a profound re-evaluation of effort itself. They step away from that traditional, one-sided pursuit and start placing a massive premium on mutuality. And this brings us to an absolute foundational concept in healthy relationships: reciprocity. Psychology tells us that the strongest connections are built on this exact dynamic, where both people invest equally in the connection. I mean, think of healthy dating kind of like a game of tennis. If you hit the ball over the net and they don't hit it back, you don't just keep serving more balls, right? Men who stop chasing no longer believe that one person should have to do all the heavy lifting. If the interest isn't mutual right from the start, they don't force it. Instead of doubling down and trying harder to win someone over, they simply move on. They're looking for an equal partner, not some prize to be won through one-sided effort.
Which leads perfectly into trait number 2, protecting time and self-worth.
That natural inclination to just walk away when effort isn't matched, it fundamentally changes how these men view two of their most valuable, non-renewable resources: their time and their energy. The days of the prolonged, arduous pursuit are officially over for this demographic. They simply do not spend weeks trying to convince someone to like them. Psychology shows that people who highly value their own time become remarkably selective with their relationships. So, instead of burning out trying to persuade a hesitant person, they strategically invest their time only in people who genuinely and clearly want to be a part of their life.
And this brilliantly illustrates the shift. When you actually break down where their mental energy goes, it's fascinating. A whopping 90% goes toward internal validation and living their own life. A small, highly selective 10% is invested externally, and absolutely 0% goes toward trying to convince someone to like them. This is a crucial psychological distinction. Look, some people measure their self-worth by how much external attention they get, but men who don't chase, they do not let another person's interest or lack thereof define their confidence. Psychology consistently suggests that stable self-esteem comes from within, completely independent of needing that constant external validation.
Moving right along to trait number 3, observing actions over words.
So if they aren't relying on external attention for validation, how exactly do they evaluate the people they actually do choose to let into that selective 10%? It all comes down to a strict reliance on observation over assumptions. This idea perfectly captures their mindset. Promises don't impress them, consistency does. Look, words are easy, and especially early on in dating, talk is incredibly cheap. Men who have consciously stopped chasing are deeply pragmatic. They know that psychology consistently shows past behavior is often one of the absolute strongest predictors of future behavior. Because of this, they heavily prefer to just sit back and observe, rather than blindly assuming someone's intentions based on what they happen to say.
When they are observing, these are the 3 exact metrics they're tracking: effort, reliability, and respect. They aren't looking for grand, sweeping, romantic declarations. Not at all. They are looking for the quiet, steady rhythm of consistent actions. Do you actually show up when you say you will? Is there mutual respect in how you communicate? Are you putting in the same amount of effort? By letting actions do the talking, they effectively and strictly filter out individuals who are really just in it for the attention of being chased, rather than the reality of a true partnership.
So the crucial point here brings us to trait number 4, embracing solo over settling.
All of these traits culminate in one final, defining psychological characteristic. It's the ultimate boundary. There's a really stark contrast at play here. On one side, we have being single. For these men, being single is not some terrifying void. It's comfortable, and it's fully aligned with their values. On the other side, we have their actual greatest fear, wasting years in an unhealthy dynamic by settling for less. Psychology tells us that people who are genuinely comfortable being alone are far less likely to settle for relationships that don't meet their core values. Basically, they would much rather be on their own than trapped in the wrong relationship where their standards of reciprocity and respect just aren't being met.
Which brings us to our grand summary of the source material today. As you've seen throughout this explainer, not chasing someone does not automatically mean a lack of interest. Actually, scratch that, it's often the exact opposite of apathy. It powerfully reflects deep self-respect, immense patience, and incredibly clear standards. It reflects a desire for relationships built firmly on equal effort. Because ultimately, sometimes the absolute strongest, most self-assured decision a person can make isn't chasing someone harder. It is knowing exactly when not to chase at all. I want to leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. We've looked at valuing mutual effort, protecting your time, maintaining internal validation, observing actions over words, and preferring being single over settling. So, which of these traits do you think is the absolute most important foundation for a healthy relationship in your own life? Take a moment to really reflect on your own standards and boundaries. It's a real game changer. Until next time, keep learning, keep observing, and thank you so much for joining me.